Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be showing you how to change the spark plugs and ignition leads in this 1997 Toyota Landcruiser 80 series. Today's video is going to apply to all 80 and 105 series cruisers with the 1FZFE 4.5 litre straight six petrol engine. So let's jump right in. We'll just quickly run through all the tools and parts that we're going to need to do the job. So you want a Phillips and a flathead screwdriver. You can also use a battery drill with a Phillips attachment if you have it. Then you're going to want a socket wrench with a 5/8 or 16mm spark plug socket. It is important that it's the spark plug type because they're a bit deeper and they have a rubber insert inside that will help you grip the spark plug. And this is just a different type, but it's the same purpose. Then we've got a 12mm open-ended spanner and a torque wrench just for doing our spark plugs up to the correct setting. Next up, we're going to need something to set the gap on our spark plugs. There are a couple of different tools. First, we've got the coin gauge type, and then we've got the feeler gauges as well. And finally, for the parts that we're going to be installing today, you're going to need 6 new spark plugs. This is the part number from Toyota, but when you open up the box, you'll find it's actually just a Denso K16R-U. So you can just buy them directly as a Denso part. And lastly, we've got the new ignition leads. We've chosen to go with a high quality aftermarket Bosch set. Before we get started on installing our new spark plugs, we just need to set the gap, and the way that you tell what it should be is you turn to the specification section of your owner's manual, and it tells us that for this particular engine, the gap should be 0.8mm. When we talk about the spark plug gap, we're referring to the gap between the inner and outer sections of the electrode, which is where the spark will jump across. These particular spark plugs don't come with the gap preset, so you do need to set and check that yourself. There are 3 common tools that you can use to change the spark plug gap. The first and cheapest is this spark plug gauge coin, which you can buy for only a couple of dollars from your local auto parts store. The way that this works is that the coin is on a taper, so you pass your electrode gap through the coin there and you just pass it around the edge until it stops, and that tells you what your gap is. But these can be a bit fiddly and it's not quite as accurate as the other methods. The most accurate method, and the one that we're going to use today, is to use a set of feeler gauges. So you just grab the 0.8mm feeler gauge in that case. And there is another method where you can use a wire gauge, which is similar to a feeler gauge, just with a few different preset options on it. So the way that we check if our gap is sufficient is you take your 0.8mm feeler gauge and you just try and pass it through the gap. And in this case, it won't pass through, which tells me that the gap is not large enough at the moment. This is where the coin gauge comes in handy. What you can do is you can put the hole over the end of the electrode and you can very gently use that to leverage it and open it up. You want to be really careful when you do this because you can break the tip if you're not careful. And now it passes through, but it passes a little bit too easily. So in this case, I actually need to close the gap a little bit. And the way that you do that is you press the end of the electrode down on a surface like a table, again, just really gently, and it will close up the gap. Once you get to a point where your feeler gauge will pass through, but it's fairly tight, that's how you know you're finished. And you want to repeat this process for all 6 of the new spark plugs. So over in the engine bay now, to get to the spark plugs, we just need to remove a couple of things. The first one is just to lift up this clip and pull the PCV hose off of the top of the engine. And we're just going to pop that over to the side. Next up, we've just got to remove the air cleaner hose because that's running over the top of the spark plugs as well. So take your Phillips head screwdriver and you just need to loosen off this clamp here. And once that's nice and loose, the easiest way we've found to get this hose off is just to undo the whole air cleaner lid. And then just gently pull these 2 air lines off. Unclip your 3 clips and you should be able to just lift the whole lid and just gently wiggle that hose off of the other end. And once you've got that loose, you can just pop it off to the side as well. So next up, we just need to remove the 2 plastic covers, which are held down by these Phillips head screws. If you do find that your screws are really burred, you can also use a 10mm socket to get these off. As you can see, this particular screw can be a little bit difficult to get to. You can use your 12mm open-ended spanner if you need to disconnect the throttle cable and move it out of the way temporarily, but make sure you put it back exactly where it was. Once they're all loose, you want to remove your 2 covers and just make sure you keep all of those covers and screws because we're going to put them back on at the end. So once you've removed those two covers, you now have access to your 6 spark plug leads. Just before we get started on replacing those leads, we're just going to unclip them all from this center holder because that's going to make it a bit easier to access. So once that's loose, you can just pop that off to the side. So the process for replacing the 6 of them is going to be the same for each. We're going to replace the lead and the spark plug at the same time, and then we're not going to lose track of which lead goes in which position. So the first thing we need to do is just to pull on this rubber boot which sits down over the casting, and it's really important that you pull by the boot and not by the lead because you can damage the leads if you're not careful. So you just want to put 3 fingers underneath the end of the rubber boot and just apply a nice even pressure upwards until it pops off. And there we go. And now you have access to your spark plug which sits down in the cylinder. Then we're going to take our 5/8 inch or 16mm spark plug socket on an extension, and we're going to pop that down through the hole, and you should feel it just pop over the end of the spark plug, and then you just want to loosen and remove that spark plug. Once it's loose, you can take it the rest of the way by hand. And you can see there that this particular socket grips onto the spark plug, so I'm able to pull it out. Then you want to take one of your new spark plugs, which we've set the gap on earlier, pop that into the end of your socket. We're going to do that up loosely by hand. And next you want to grab a torque wrench and pop your spark plug socket on there. And we're going to do this up, and the figure we're looking for is 14 foot-pounds, which is 20 Newton meters. So at this point, if you were just replacing your spark plugs, you're ready to reinstate your ignition leads down into the hole, but today we're going to replace these as well. So in order to replace this first shortest ignition lead, we're just going to pop it out of the remaining clips. And then all we need to do is unclip it from the distributor cap. So if you've still got the factory ignition leads with the red head on them, and they have a little clip on them that holds them captive, so you want to just take your flathead screwdriver and pop it in behind the clip there, and you can just rotate the flathead just to force the clip open like that, and that'll allow you to then just pull the ignition lead off of the distributor cap. And there we go. Once that little clip's off, you should be able to just pull straight out, and now we're able to install the new ignition lead. It can be a good idea to replace your ignition leads one at a time because they're all different lengths. So we've laid them all out on the table, and then you can clearly see that the one that we're going to need is that shortest one that's the same length as the one that we've removed. These Bosch ignition leads don't have an external clip like the factory Toyota ones do. Instead, they have little channels inside which are going to slot over the little clips on the outside of the distributor cap. So you just want to make sure as well that you have your little pin nice and central. And then you just push that straight on and it will just clip in and engage. And you should hear a little click once it's in place. And then you're ready to just pop this down into the hole. And you just want to give it a nice firm even push, and you should hear a bit of a pop as the rubber boot sits down over the casing. And there we go. And as you do each one, it's a good idea to clip them back into the little plastic brackets just so you can keep track of what goes where. And basically we're just going to repeat exactly the same process for all 6 of the ignition leads and spark plugs. Now that all the leads are replaced, we just need to reinstate the last clip holder. So at this point we've finished replacing all of the spark plugs and the leads. There's just one more thing that we can replace which came in the kit from Bosch, which is the lead that actually goes to the distributor cap. So at the distributor cap end we've got a similar clip. We're just going to use a screwdriver to push that one in. And that will pop out and you can pull that out. There we go. And then following that along, at the other end, you want to use your screwdriver again. And that should just pop off like that. So all we're doing with the screwdriver is opening that tab out like that so it gets past. Same thing on the other end, you're just opening the tab like that. So the new lead from Bosch will have a right angle end and a straight end. The right angle end is going to go down onto the little unit on the car. And again, it has little channels inside that are going to line up with the clips. You should just feel that click into place. And the other end is going to the distributor cap. And again, you can clearly see this one has the channels that need to line up with the clips. And you should be able to just push that one on and hear it click. So the last thing to do now is just to put back everything that we had to remove, and we're going to start with those plastic covers. And again, you can either use a Phillips head screwdriver or a 10mm socket for these ones. Then the second cover. And just make sure when you're doing this that you're not squashing any of the ignition leads that we've just installed. And then the air cleaner hose. So with that clip still loose, you just want to have the screw at the top and you just want to gently push that on. You might have to massage it a bit to get it on all the way. And then just pop your airbox lid down and over the bolt. Then you've got your 3 clips around the edges of the airbox and your 2 air hoses. And then your wing nut. Then once that's all in position, you just want to tighten down that screw to clamp that hose on. And again, this is just a Phillips head. And then finally, we just want to reinstate our PCV hose. So you just push that down and make sure that clip's holding it on. And that's it, guys. That's all there is to changing your spark plugs and ignition leads. It's a really simple way of saving yourself some money and making sure your cruiser runs smoothly. If you've got any questions or something you'd like to see in a future video, we'd love to hear it down in the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next video. Alright, now we just need to see if the car runs.